Hey everyone, this is Tom. I'm so excited you're back to join me for another video on design thinking. In this video, I want to talk about two things. The first thing I want to talk about is when would an organization use design thinking? So we'll address that here in a second. The other part of the video is once the organization is convinced that they should be using design thinking, I think they need to have a good understanding of what design thinking is. So we'll talk about what design thinking is and what the 6 process steps are that are followed by teams in order to facilitate the design thinking process. All right, let's rewind a little bit and talk about when an organization would want to use design thinking. So I've seen a schematic that shows somewhat of a decision tree that helps organizations to evaluate what improvement methodology they should use. So within this framework, an organization can ask themselves a series of questions and answer yes, no, in order to arrive at what's appropriate framework. Now, this isn't an exact science, but it is very helpful for organizations to evaluate and assess or diagnose which framework is most appropriate to be using. So within this framework, one of the first questions is does a known solution or best practice already exist? So in answering that question, if the organization says yes, there's a solution, there's a best practice, and we just have to deploy it, the most appropriate toolbox for that organization to use is project management. If there is not a solution, now they know I've got to come up with a solution. And that takes them to the next question of, do we even have a process in place? So does a solution exist in this space? Yes or no? Or does the process align with, or is it capable of satisfying the current customer's needs and demands? So if the answer to that is no, you don't have a process, or the process you have is incapable of satisfying customers' demands, at that point, the design thinking framework is most appropriate. The other branch then, assume that they have a process, and maybe the issue with that process is it's inefficient, or there's waste within it, or it's highly varied and there's lack of standard. So they'd ask themselves, what then within this problem is the major issue? Is it an efficiency issue? And if that's the case, they'll use lean. If it's a variation issue, if that's the case, they'll use Six Sigma. And within all of those frameworks, kind of surrounding it all, is the philosophy of change leadership. So it's creating a culture, or it's creating an environment where any change or any improvement effort could succeed. So I hope that helps you understand when is it appropriate to use design thinking. Other contexts is for strategic purposes or intentionally innovating or disrupting or bringing a new concept to market. So the design thinking process, it fits in those contexts. So now that we know when we should use it, let's talk about what design thinking is. So design thinking is two things. It's design and thinking. So the thinking piece of design thinking is the mindset that the team and the individuals who are applying the tools put themselves in order to be successful. The other part is the 6 steps that the team will follow in order to innovate and bring forward solutions on the customer's behalf. So in the very first step, they're going to empathize. And in this step, they conduct qualitative research by going out and hosting conversations, maybe in the form of deep dive interviews, or fly on the wall observations or other research methods to collect information from the customers about their experiences and their expectations. Now, with this information, they need to be able to frame the opportunity from the customer's perspective. And that's the second step within the design thinking process, is to create a point of view that summarizes the problem or presents the challenge from the customer's perspective. With that challenge in mind, the team is then able to begin ideating and generating a list of solutions that will solve that customer's problem. And that's step 3, the ideate phase. Now, with those ideas, they're not all created equal, so not everything the team comes up with is going to get acted on. But those ideas that have the most merit are going to move to the next step, step 4, which is prototyping. In the prototyping step, the team is taking ideas from rough drafts, loosely defined concepts, to more tangible ideas that maybe are portrayed in sketches, storyboards, role playing, or if possible, working prototypes. Now that they have more materialized ideas and proof of concepts, they can begin moving into step 5, which is to test the ideas. Now, testing can occur in many ways, and I encourage organizations to first test internally with maybe the design team and a subgroup of stakeholders to get feedback from an internal perspective. But you want to be very careful. You don't want the internal perspective to be the veto power that prevents good ideas from getting in front of customers, because that's the second step in testing, is to do user acceptance testing or customer feedback testing to see them interact with these ideas in solutions and to hear from them what they think about the ideas. And then as you're getting feedback, those things may lead you to pivot and change ideas, or maybe focus on different problems, or tweak the idea and create a change or an advancement to the prototype. So it's very iterative as a process. But once you have compiled a list of the ideas that have a business case and a strong customer case, the last step is to move into the deploy phase. I read recently on social media something I think that's really great that I want to share with you all, is that if the deploy phase is not part of the design process, sure, the team had a lot of fun and came up with a lot of good ideas, but it was a waste of time. And we're returning to that quote of, I'd rather have a decent idea well executed than a good idea poorly executed. So the deployment phase is all about execution.